She thought she was just feeding a hungry stray dog, but the next morning, he came back, and what he brought with him, it left her standing in her doorway, shaking, eyes full of tears. Sometimes, life throws something unexpected your way, not just to test your heart, but to show you what it's really made of. One woman, just going about her normal day, stopped to show kindness to a tired, lost German shepherd. She didn't think much of it, but less than 24 hours later, that same dog was back at her front door, with something that would change her life forever. It was a quiet Tuesday evening in a small town just outside Asheville, North Carolina. The sun was just beginning to set behind the hills, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple. A warm breeze rustled the leaves, and the distant hum of cicadas filled the air like a soft lullaby. On Maple Drive, everything looked just as it always did, quiet, slow, almost frozen in time. Emma Holloway had just returned home from work. Her apron, dusted with flour, still hung from her neck. She kicked off her shoes at the front door and rubbed her aching feet. The bakery she worked at wasn't fancy, but it had been her second home for over a decade. She loved the smell of cinnamon rolls baking in the morning, the chatter of regulars, the way the sunlight poured through the big front windows. But even something you love can tire you out when you're doing it alone. Her house was modest, a single-story cottage with pale blue shutters and a porch swing that creaked every time the wind picked up. The garden out front was her pride. Rows of tulips, marigolds, and daisies lined the stone path leading to her gate. Her hands were rough from years of kneading dough and digging soil, but she wore the lines like badges. Every wrinkle on her face had a story. Emma lived alone. Her 2 children were grown and scattered across the country. Her husband, John, had passed away 5 years earlier from a sudden stroke. That day had split her life in two. Before and after, she had never been the same since. She coped by staying busy, gardening, baking, volunteering at the church. But the evenings were the hardest. That was when the silence settled in. She walked up to the gate, keys in hand, ready to unlock it like she did every other day. But just as she slipped the key into the lock, she heard it, a sound, soft, low, almost like a whisper in the wind, a whine. Emma froze. She turned her head slowly, scanning the sidewalk and the hedges beyond, and then she saw him, across the street, partially hidden behind the rose bushes of the vacant property next door, stood a dog, a large German shepherd. His fur was matted and dusty, the color of soot and sand. His ribs pushed gently against his sides, visible even under all the thick fur. His ears drooped, not in fear, but exhaustion. But what struck Emma the most were his eyes, deep, dark brown eyes, full of something that cut deeper than hunger. It was sadness, a sort of grief, a weariness that came not just from being lost or alone, but from knowing pain, carrying it. The dog didn't bark, didn't move. He just stood there, staring at her through the fading light. Emma's breath caught. She wasn't afraid, no. Something about him felt familiar, not in a literal sense, but in the way grief can recognize grief, in the way broken things understand each other. She opened the gate and slowly walked into her yard, not taking her eyes off him. "Hey there, boy," she said softly, unsure if he'd bolt. He didn't move, just kept watching. Emma turned and walked inside her house. She opened her fridge, pulled out a bowl of leftover roasted chicken from the night before, John's favorite meal, the one she still cooked out of habit, and poured it into an old blue ceramic bowl. She hesitated for a moment, then added a few spoonfuls of rice. When she stepped back outside, the sky was dimming quickly. Crickets had started their song. She placed the bowl gently near the front gate. "There you go, sweetheart," she whispered. The dog still didn't move. He looked at the bowl, then at her, then at the bowl again. For a moment, it felt like time stopped, and then, slowly, cautiously, he stepped forward, each paw lifted carefully, like he was expecting the ground to give way beneath him. His tail didn't wag, he made no sound, but eventually, he reached the bowl and lowered his head to eat. Emma stood a few feet away, hands folded in front of her, eyes watching every movement. The way he ate, it wasn't frantic. He wasn't scarfing it down like most strays would. He was slow, almost polite. When he finished, he looked up at her again. Their eyes met one more time. Then, just as silently as he'd come, he turned and walked away, not toward the sidewalk, but into the woods behind her house. Emma stood there long after he disappeared into the shadows. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept replaying those moments in her head, the way he looked at her, the quiet in his steps, the tiredness in his body, but the strength in his eyes. Who was he? Where had he come from? Why did it feel like she had just met someone who knew exactly what it meant to lose? The next morning, Emma was up before the sun. She stood on her porch, a mug of coffee in her hand, staring at the same place she had seen him the night before. Nothing, just dew-covered grass, and the sound of birds chirping. She sighed, disappointed but not surprised. Maybe he was just passing through, a stray looking for a quick meal. Maybe he was already gone, wandering off to another street, another porch, another kind soul. But then she heard it again. The gate creaked. She turned sharply. There he was, the same German shepherd, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him, almost hidden in the tall grass, just outside the fence, were two tiny, shaking figures, puppies. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. The dog stepped forward, pausing to glance back at the pups. They stayed behind, unsure, peeking out from behind a fallen log. One was smaller than the other, with a patch of white on its forehead. The other looked almost like a miniature version of the shepherd himself. Emma's heart twisted. This wasn't just a hungry stray. This was a father, or a protector, maybe even both. He had come back, not for himself, but for them, and he had brought them to her. She took a slow step forward. The shepherd didn't move, didn't flinch. He stood like a statue, watching her, calm but alert. Emma knelt beside the gate. "You brought your babies," she said softly, tears already forming in her eyes. She ran back inside and filled a second bowl with water and two smaller dishes with food, some leftover scrambled eggs and bread. When she returned, the puppies had taken a few timid steps closer. She set the bowls down and backed away. The big dog nudged one of the pups gently with his nose, coaxing him forward, and then together they ate, all three of them. That morning, Emma sat on the porch for over an hour, watching the little family eat, drink, and rest. She didn't move. She didn't need to. It was like something sacred was happening in front of her, something too fragile to interrupt. And for the first time in a very long time, Emma didn't feel alone. The puppies ate in short, nervous bursts, frequently glancing up at Emma. They were thin, their ribs just beginning to show through patchy fur. One of them had a limp, barely noticeable, but Emma saw it. Every few steps, his back leg would drag slightly. The other puppy was more energetic, constantly nudging its sibling like it was trying to reassure it with tiny, awkward hops. Emma's heart broke and swelled all at once. She watched as the father, because by now, she was certain he was their father, ate only after both puppies had finished. He stood back until they were done, his eyes never leaving them, alert for danger. Only when they had curled into a soft heap near the flower bed did he lean forward and lick the last scraps from the bowl. Even then, he ate slowly, carefully. That's when she noticed something else. Around his neck, partially hidden under thick fur, was something dark, a collar. It was worn and dirty, but unmistakable. He hadn't always been a stray. Emma stood up slowly, trying not to startle them, and walked back into the house. She dialed the number for the local animal shelter, just in case anyone had reported a missing German shepherd. As the phone rang, her eyes flicked back out the window. The dog was lying near the fence, head resting on his paws, eyes fixed on her front door. Someone answered the phone. Blue Ridge County Animal Services. "How can I help you?" Emma explained what had happened. The dog, the puppies, the collar. The woman on the line asked for a description, asked if he seemed aggressive. Emma assured her he wasn't. "In fact," she said, "he seems like he's trained, disciplined. I've never seen a stray like this." The woman paused. "We haven't had any recent reports of a missing German shepherd with pups, but I'll double-check the older logs. Sometimes, dogs go missing and aren't reported until weeks later." Emma gave her address, then hung up, but something in her gut told her this wasn't a simple case of a lost dog. That collar, it wasn't just a pet collar. She was almost certain she saw something on it, a tag, maybe even something stitched into the fabric. Later that day, when the dog returned with the puppies once more for food and water, Emma made a decision. She grabbed a lawn chair, moved it closer to the gate, and sat down. The German shepherd eyed her cautiously, but didn't move away. He was starting to trust her, little by little. That's when she noticed the nameplate on the collar. The metal was tarnished and scratched, but under the grime, she saw something etched into it. 3 letters, K9. She leaned in slowly, barely breathing. There was a number, too, a badge number. Her heart started to pound. K9. She whispered the letters out loud, and the shepherd's ears perked. He looked at her, head tilting slightly. That wasn't just any dog. He was trained, military or police. That explained everything. The posture, the silence, the discipline, the way he protected the pups. But then why was he out here, alone, emaciated, with 2 pups by his side? She stood, walked slowly into the house, and returned with an old leash from Max's drawer. She had never thrown it away. Something in her hadn't been able to let it go. She held it gently, like a relic from another life. She approached the shepherd slowly, speaking in soft, soothing tones. "Hey buddy, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The dog didn't retreat. She knelt beside him and reached out with the leash. He flinched, but only slightly. Then, to her surprise, he lifted his head and allowed her to clip the leash onto the collar. She exhaled slowly. "I knew it," she whispered. "You're not just any dog, are you?" That night, after feeding them once more, Emma allowed the three of them to sleep on her porch. She left out a thick old blanket, and the shepherd curled himself around the pups like a shield. He never took his eyes off her window. That kind of loyalty, that kind of vigilance, it didn't come from the streets. It was trained, taught, earned. The next morning, Emma made a decision. She had to find out who he really was. Emma stepped off her porch slowly, coffee mug still in hand, her eyes narrowing to adjust to the soft morning sun filtering through the tall trees. And there he was again. The German shepherd stood just outside her gate, but this time, something was different. He wasn't alone. Behind him, hidden in the shadows of the pine trees, was a second figure, much smaller, hesitant. Emma squinted. It was another dog, a puppy, thin, filthy, and trembling. The older shepherd stood slightly in front, like a protective wall. His posture was upright, alert, but not aggressive. It was almost as if he was asking her for something. Emma's breath caught in her chest. She wasn't imagining it. He had come back, not for himself, but for the little one. Without thinking, she set her coffee down on the porch railing and rushed inside, grabbing more leftovers, scrambled eggs, some leftover ham, a piece of bread. She placed it gently in 2 bowls, near the same spot by her gate. The shepherd didn't move at first. He turned to the smaller pup behind him and gave a short, low grunt, barely a sound, but somehow filled with meaning, encouragement, permission. The pup took a few tentative steps forward, sniffing the air. His legs were shaky, his fur matted in clumps. Emma's heart broke at the sight. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days. Slowly, the puppy made it to the bowls and began devouring the food. The older shepherd stood still, watching carefully, eyes darting between Emma and the little one. Only after the puppy had eaten nearly half did the shepherd step forward and quietly begin eating what was left. Emma didn't move. She barely breathed. She understood now. This wasn't just a stray who wandered into her life. This was a protector, a guardian, maybe even a father, and that raised 100 questions. Where had they come from? What had happened to them? And why did this dog trust her enough to bring the pup here? The meal lasted just a few minutes. Then, once again, without a sound, the shepherd turned back toward the woods. The puppy followed, and they were gone, but not from Emma's mind. She didn't go to work that day. She couldn't. Her thoughts were completely taken over by those eyes. Those 2 sets of eyes, one full of cautious strength, the other, pure fear and hunger. She spent the morning researching online what to do when a stray brings a puppy to your house. Most of the articles told her to call animal control. Some said to avoid contact, but Emma knew instinctively that wasn't the right path. Something deep in her gut told her this dog wasn't dangerous, that he wasn't just wandering aimlessly. There was something purposeful about him. That evening, just before sunset, she left out 2 bowls again, this time filled with warm rice, ground turkey, and chopped carrots. She even filled a shallow dish with clean water. She waited by the window. Minutes passed, then an hour, and just when the light began to fade into dusk, she saw them. First the shepherd, then the puppy, trailing close behind. They moved like shadows, cautiously, quietly, stepping from the tree line and approaching the gate. Emma stayed still inside, not wanting to disturb the fragile trust they were building. The older dog sniffed the food, gave a low hum, and let the puppy eat first again. Only once the pup was full did the shepherd eat the rest. It was so precise, so deliberate, like he was trained. Emma whispered to herself, "You were trained, weren't you?" She didn't know why she said it, but it felt true. That night, after they disappeared again into the woods, Emma couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, her mind replaying the image of the shepherd standing guard, always placing himself between the pup and danger. Who did that? Who taught him that? And then it hit her. K9, the military, the police, the way he moved, his silence, his patience. He wasn't a stray. He was a survivor. She rose from bed in the middle of the night and turned on her laptop. She started digging into local stories, missing dogs, retired K9 units, escaped service animals. There wasn't much, but then, buried deep in an old local forum post, she found something strange. A user named ValleyWatcher78 had posted 3 months ago. Anyone see that old German shepherd roaming near the edge of Candler Forest? He's got a limp in his back leg and never lets you get too close. But I swear, he moves like a soldier. Someone must be looking for him. It had one comment. Saw him too, near Sugar Creek. Looks like he's protecting something. Emma leaned back in her chair. So others had seen him, but no one had done anything. Why? Maybe they didn't care. Maybe they were scared. But Emma couldn't just sit by. Not anymore. The next day, she called the local animal shelter and asked if any service dogs had gone missing recently. The woman on the phone said no reports had come in lately, but a few months back, a retired canine had gone missing from a small town a couple hours away. She didn't have details, but she promised to look into it. Emma left out food again that evening, and once more he came. But this time something changed. As the puppy ate, the German shepherd didn't eat right away. Instead, he stared at her, long and hard, and then he stepped closer. Emma's breath caught. He walked to the edge of the gate, his nose just inches from the metal bars. His eyes locked on hers. She slowly crouched down, hands resting gently on her knees. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're safe here." For a moment, neither moved. Then, just barely, the shepherd dipped his head once. A tiny gesture, but Emma felt it like an earthquake. Trust. The next few days followed a rhythm. Every morning and evening, Emma left out food and water. Every time, the shepherd and the puppy came. Every time, they stayed just a little longer, watched her a little more closely. Emma began noticing other things too. The way the shepherd limped slightly on his right back leg, like an old injury that never healed properly. The tiny scar across the bridge of his nose. The way he would always scan the surroundings before letting the puppy step forward. This dog had seen battle. She was sure of it now. One afternoon, she took a leap of faith. She left the front gate open. She didn't say anything, didn't call them in. She just opened it and waited. At dusk, they came again. The shepherd stopped short when he saw the gate ajar. His body tensed, protective, alert, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he stood still for a long moment. Then, with the gentlest nudge, he moved the puppy behind him and stepped forward into the yard. Emma stayed seated on the porch, not making a sound. The shepherd sniffed the ground, took a few steps, checked every direction. Then he looked at her again, not with fear, not even with suspicion, but with familiarity. The puppy scurried in and began eating. Emma smiled softly, tears pricking her eyes. It felt like a breakthrough. That night, she sat outside for over an hour after they left, just thinking, who had trained this dog? Why had no one come looking for him? And more importantly, what had happened to him? The following morning, everything changed again. As she stepped outside with her morning coffee, she stopped dead in her tracks, because there, on the edge of her porch, was something she hadn't seen before. A collar, old cracked leather, with a rusty metal tag hanging from it, and right beside it, sitting calmly, was the German shepherd. He had brought it to her. Emma's hands trembled as she picked up the tag. It read, Saber, K9 Unit Number 324. Do not separate from handler. She gasped. This wasn't just a trained dog. He was a K9. But what did do not separate from handler mean? Where was his handler? Why was he alone with a puppy? She flipped the tag over. There, barely readable beneath the rust, were two lines. Handler, Sergeant D. Rhodes. Unit, Asheville PD K9 Division. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She rushed inside and searched for Sergeant D. Rhodes, Asheville PD K9, and what she found chilled her to the bone. A report from 7 months ago. Police Sergeant Daniel Rhodes, veteran K9 officer, presumed dead after vehicle submerged in river during pursuit. K9 partner listed as missing, presumed dead, no confirmation. Emma sat back in shock. Saber had survived that crash, and for 7 months, he'd been alone. No, not alone. He had the puppy, but that raised even more questions. Where did the puppy come from? If Saber had been on the run since the accident, had he found the puppy later, or was it even possible? Emma's thoughts were racing, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just a stray looking for food. This was a hero, and he was carrying a burden no one had noticed. Until now, Emma sat frozen for several minutes, staring at the rusty tag in her hands. Saber's name, etched so clearly on the metal, felt like a lifeline to a story she had only begun to understand. Her mind raced with questions, but the most urgent was, what had happened to Sergeant Daniel Rhodes? If Saber's handler was missing, maybe even dead, who had taken care of this dog for all these months? And why was Saber here, outside Emma's quiet home, in the middle of nowhere, with this tiny puppy at his side? Her curiosity turned to concern. Emma wasn't a young woman anymore, but she was stubborn, and when she cared about something, she didn't give up easily. She grabbed her phone and dialed the Asheville Police Department's non-emergency number. She hoped to speak with someone who might know about Sergeant Rhodes, about Saber, about the whole story. After several rings, a calm voice answered. "Police Department, how may I help you?" Emma cleared her throat. "Hi, my name is Emma Holloway. I live near Candler, and I found a German Shepherd with a K9 tag that says he belongs to Sergeant Daniel Rhodes of the Asheville PD. I was wondering, is Sergeant Rhodes okay? Has anyone heard from him?" There was silence on the other end. "One moment, ma'am," the officer replied. Emma waited anxiously. Finally, a deeper voice returned. "Emma, you said? This is Lieutenant Harris. I'm familiar with Sergeant Rhodes' case." Emma's heart skipped. "Lieutenant Harris, thank you for taking my call. I found the dog near my home. He looks exhausted but loyal. He even brought a puppy with him. I'm worried about what's happened to Sergeant Rhodes. Could you tell me what you know?" The lieutenant's voice was somber. "Sergeant Rhodes was one of our best officers. He and Saber were partners for years. About 7 months ago, they were in a vehicle pursuit. The chase ended with their car plunging into the French Broad River. Rescue teams pulled Sergeant Rhodes from the water, but Saber was missing. We searched for days, but he was never found." Emma swallowed hard. "And Sergeant Rhodes? He suffered a head injury, spent weeks in the hospital, then rehab. He's been recovering at home ever since. Not ready to return to duty yet. We've kept the search open for Saber, but," he paused, "it's been difficult. We assumed the worst." Emma's grip on the phone tightened. "But if Saber was found here, near my home, that's incredible." Lieutenant Harris interrupted. "We never expected Saber to survive. He was trained to protect and obey. But the river, it's hard to believe." Emma's mind flashed back to the limping shepherd, the scarred nose, the way he'd watched over the puppy, like a soldier guarding a comrade. "Lieutenant, what about the puppy? Any reports of a stray or injured animal nearby?" "No reports. That's unusual." Emma nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "Thank you, Lieutenant. I'll keep an eye on them, but they need care and maybe medical attention." "We appreciate that. If you can keep them safe, contact Animal Control. We'll assist however we can." Emma ended the call and sat in silence. She realized now the magnitude of what she was facing. This wasn't just about feeding a hungry dog. It was about saving a hero's life, and maybe, just maybe, about reuniting a team that had been torn apart by tragedy. Over the next few days, Emma devoted herself to caring for Saber and the puppy she quietly named Scout. She took them small steps at a time, earning their trust by staying patient and calm. The puppy was fragile but had a spark. He followed Saber closely, learning from his every move. Saber, for his part, was cautious but protective, allowing Emma to brush his matted fur and check his limp leg. One afternoon, while the dogs rested on her porch, Emma sat beside them and pulled out her phone. She searched for videos and photos of Sergeant Rhodes and Saber together. There were a few on the police department's website and social media pages. The images showed a proud, strong K9 partner, alert, confident, trained to a T. Emma's eyes filled with tears as she compared the pictures to the weary dog at her feet. "How did you survive, Saber? Where have you been all this time?" She didn't get an answer, but the way Saber leaned his head against her knee told her he was grateful to be found. Then, the biggest challenge appeared. One morning, Emma noticed Saber limping more severely. His back leg dragged awkwardly, and he winced when he moved. Emma's heart clenched. She had to get him to a vet, but how? The dog was wary of strangers. The puppy was too small to leave alone. She called the animal shelter again, explaining the situation. "Can someone come help?" she asked. The shelter worker hesitated. "We can send someone, but if Saber is a police dog, this needs to be handled carefully." Emma nodded, understanding the weight of the situation. Later that day, a gentle man in a uniform arrived. Officer Mark Daniels was part of the department's K9 unit, and Emma felt relief seeing him. Mark knelt carefully, letting Saber sniff his hand. Saber stiffened, then relaxed. "Good boy," Mark said softly. "I know you've been through a lot." Emma explained everything: the collar, the puppy, the abandoned state of the dogs. Mark's face grew serious. "We've been looking for Saber for months. If he's been with you, that explains a lot. We want to help." The vet team gave Saber a full checkup. The limp was from a torn ligament, an injury likely from the river accident or the months of survival afterward. Scout was malnourished, but otherwise healthy. The vet recommended surgery for Saber's leg and a recovery period with plenty of rest. Emma agreed to keep them both at her home during recovery. As the days passed, something remarkable happened. Saber grew stronger. Scout became bolder. Emma's home filled with the sounds of soft panting, playful yips, and the occasional bark. But beneath the surface, A deeper story waited to be uncovered. One evening, as Emma was feeding the dogs, a knock came at her door. She opened it cautiously. Standing there was a man in plain clothes, with kind but intense eyes. "Emma Holloway." She nodded. "I'm Detective Mark Langley with Asheville PD. We've been investigating Sergeant Rhodes' accident and Saber's disappearance. I heard you found him." Emma stepped aside, letting the detective in. Mark looked at the dogs and smiled faintly. "You've done a good thing." Emma sighed. "But what about Sergeant Rhodes?" Mark's eyes darkened. "He's alive, but his condition is serious. He's in a rehab facility, suffering from memory loss and PTSD. We think Saber's survival might be the key to his recovery." Emma's mind reeled. "You mean Saber could help bring him back?" "Exactly. The bond between Handler and K9 is incredibly strong. Reuniting them could trigger memories and aid his healing." Emma looked down at Saber. She'd come to see him not just as a dog, but as a warrior, a survivor, and a friend. She made a decision then. She would do everything in her power to bring Saber and Sergeant Rhodes back together. But as she prepared for the next step, a shadow lurked. Someone else knew about Saber's return. Someone who didn't want the story to be told. Someone with a secret tied to the accident and to the missing months Saber had endured. Emma couldn't sleep that night. Her thoughts raced through every detail. The accident, the missing K9, the tiny puppy who had somehow survived alongside him. Why had no one come looking sooner? Why had Saber been left alone all this time? And most terrifyingly, what danger was still out there? She rose from bed and looked out her window into the dark woods behind her home. The moonlight cast long shadows among the trees. Suddenly, a rustle. Emma's heart jumped. Was Saber watching? Or was something else waiting in the dark? Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Stop looking for the dog. It's not safe." Emma stared at the screen, breath shallow. Who was warning her? Why? And what did they want to hide? She knew one thing for sure. This quiet town, her simple life, and the broken dog at her gate were about to change everything. The days ahead would test Emma's courage. They would reveal truths about loyalty, survival, and the power of a bond that refuses to break. And the answers would come with a cost. Because sometimes, when a hero falls, the scars run deeper than anyone can see. And sometimes, when a dog risks everything to save a man, the story doesn't end with just a reunion. It begins there. The morning light filtered gently through the curtains of Emma's living room, painting the walls in soft gold. Outside, the neighborhood was waking slowly. Birds chirped, and a distant lawnmower hummed. But inside, Emma's world was anything but peaceful. Saber lay quietly on a thick blanket near the fireplace, his heavy breath steady but labored. Scout, the tiny puppy, rested curled up at his side, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Emma sat nearby, scrolling through photos of Sergeant Daniel Rhodes and Saber on her phone again, faces full of life, days when danger was met head-on and trust was unwavering. She reached out and gently stroked Saber's rough coat, her fingers tracing the lines of his battle scars. Every mark told a story of survival, courage, and heartbreak. "Tomorrow is the surgery, boy," she whispered. "We'll get you fixed up." Saber lifted his head briefly, meeting her eyes. In those deep, tired brown eyes, Emma saw something fierce, a warrior spirit refusing to be broken. The next day, the vet clinic buzzed with quiet urgency. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a compassionate veterinarian known for her work with police dogs, led the team caring for Saber. She crouched beside him, speaking softly as technicians prepared the surgical instruments. "His torn ligament isn't surprising, given everything he's been through," she explained to Emma. "But the real concern is how long he's been surviving with this injury. It's a testament to his resilience." Emma nodded, biting her lip. "I just want him to have a chance at a good life again." The surgery took several hours. Emma paced the waiting room, her mind racing through memories of Saber's arrival, the mysterious puppy, and the ominous message she had received days before. When Dr. Mitchell finally emerged, her face was calm but serious. "The procedure went well," she said. "Saber will need several weeks of rest and rehab, but I'm optimistic." Emma exhaled, relief flooding her chest. Back at Emma's home, the healing process began. Days stretched into weeks as Saber slowly regained strength. Scout's boundless energy brought light and laughter into the quiet house, chasing away shadows. Emma carefully managed their routines, feeding, gentle walks, and quiet moments on the porch. Saber's trust grew too. Once wary of human touch, he now accepted Emma's care, leaning into her kindness like a soldier finding shelter after a long battle. One afternoon, as Emma sat knitting, she noticed Saber gazing intently into the woods behind the house. His ears twitched, his nose twitched, and then a soft bark. Scout answered eagerly, and both dogs took off, darting into the trees. Emma hurried after them. What they found changed everything. Deep in the woods, beyond tangled roots and thick underbrush, was a small, hidden shelter made from fallen branches and leaves. It looked like a rough den, but signs of recent use were everywhere. Scout sniffed eagerly, tail wagging. Saber stood guard, alert and protective. Emma approached cautiously and spotted what looked like remnants of a campfire, old food containers, and a torn piece of fabric caught on a branch. Her heart pounded. Could this be where Saber had spent those missing months? Had someone been living here, maybe Sergeant Rhodes? Or had someone else been involved? Emma took photos and made notes, determined to share this discovery with Detective Mark Langley. A few days later, Detective Langley arrived at Emma's doorstep again, this time with 2 more officers. They walked together to the hidden shelter, examining every detail. This could be a crucial piece of the puzzle, Langley said gravely. Whoever stayed here, if it was Rhodes or someone else, must have been struggling. Emma shivered at the thought. Langley pulled out a small bag of forensic tools. We'll collect evidence, see if there are clues about what happened, or who else might be involved. As the team worked, Emma watched Saber and Scout nearby. The dog seemed to understand something was happening, something important. Days later, lab results came back. The shelter showed signs, not only of human habitation, but of a struggle. Traces of blood were found on the fabric. More puzzling were fingerprints belonging to an unknown individual. Langley's face darkened. This changes everything. Emma's stomach twisted. Who had been involved? Was Sergeant Rhodes in danger beyond the accident? And what had Saber protected him from? Questions piled up, but answers remained elusive. One evening, as Emma fed the dogs, the phone rang. It was Langley. We found a lead, he said. There's a missing person report filed 6 months ago. A man seen near the woods, acting suspiciously. He had connections to illegal activities, drug trafficking and theft. We think he might have had something to do with the accident. Emma's heart sank. Is Sergeant Rhodes safe now? Langley hesitated. He's stable, but still struggling with his memories. We're hoping Saber's presence can help. Emma looked at the dogs and smiled softly. We'll do everything we can to bring them back. Over the following weeks, Emma worked closely with police and a canine therapist to help Saber and Sergeant Rhodes reconnect. They arranged a meeting at the rehab facility. When Saber saw Daniel Rhodes for the first time in months, his tail wagged hesitantly. Daniel's eyes, clouded and distant, slowly focused. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a shaky voice, Daniel whispered, "Saber?" Saber barked softly and nuzzled his hand. Tears streamed down Daniel's face. The bond was alive. Slowly, Daniel's memories returned. Saber's loyalty and presence sparked hope where there had been despair. Emma visited often, bringing Scout along. The small family grew closer, bound by courage and love. But the shadow of the past lingered. The man behind the accident was still out there, and the fight to protect this new family was only beginning. The night was thick with tension, every sound amplified in the stillness. Emma's heart pounded so loudly, she was sure the intruder could hear it. Saber stood rigid, his growl low and steady, a warning that danger was near. Scout's small body trembled beside him, but she didn't back away. The shadowy figure stepped into the moonlight. It was a man tall, with a dark jacket pulled tight against the chill. His eyes flicked nervously, searching. Emma's mind raced. Could this be the person Detective Langley had been chasing? The one connected to Daniel's accident? Suddenly, Saber barked sharply, breaking the silence. The man froze, then bolted toward the woods. But Saber was faster. With a powerful leap, the dog was at his heels, teeth bared but not attacking, just holding him back. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She recognized the man now. The same face that had appeared on the news, linked to a string of crimes that had terrified the town. He was desperate, dangerous. "Stay back," Emma shouted, but the man ignored her. Saber was holding him, preventing escape, but the man struggled violently. Then, as if summoned by the chaos, headlights swept across the driveway. Detective Langley's car pulled up, and officers jumped out, guns drawn. "Drop your weapon," the detective commanded. The man's eyes darted wildly. With a sudden, reckless move, he lunged toward Emma. Time slowed. Saber reacted instantly, placing himself between Emma and the man, growling fiercely. Scout barked, joining the defense. The man stumbled back, realizing he was outnumbered. Hands raised in surrender, he fell to his knees. Emma's legs felt weak. Her hands trembled as she dialed 911. Officers cuffed the man and led him away, and the tension began to fade. Emma looked down at Saber and Scout, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. At that moment, her phone buzzed again. It was a message from Daniel. "Emma, you were amazing. Saber's more than a dog. He's a hero. We couldn't have made it without him." The words hit her like a wave. She realized this wasn't just a story about a stray dog anymore. It was a story about courage, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between humans and their canine partners. Emma stepped outside, the cool night air brushing her face. Saber nudged her hand, his eyes warm and trusting. Scout wagged her tail, sensing the danger had passed. As the officers took the man away, Emma knew life would never be the same, because sometimes the smallest acts of kindness lead to the greatest miracles. In the days that followed, Emma's quiet life blossomed into something she never expected. Saber and Scout weren't just stray dogs anymore. They had become her family, her protectors, and a constant reminder of the incredible power of kindness. Emma often thought back to that first evening, when she offered a simple bowl of food to a weary dog. Little did she know, that small act would change everything, not just for her, but for Daniel, the town, and the two loyal canine heroes. Daniel's recovery was slow but steady. Saber remained by his side every step of the way, a steadfast companion with a heart full of loyalty. Emma visited often, bringing fresh flowers and homemade treats for the dogs, grateful that her life had intertwined with theirs. The community, inspired by the story of courage and hope, rallied together. The local shelter organized fundraisers to support other rescue dogs with troubled pasts. People began to understand that every animal, no matter how lost or broken, carries a story worth hearing and a heart worth loving. Emma's garden bloomed brighter, her days filled with new purpose. She wasn't alone anymore. She had Saber and Scout, and through them, she had found a connection that healed wounds deeper than anyone could see. This story isn't just about a woman and a dog. It's about how compassion can break down walls, how loyalty can bridge worlds, and how sometimes life's greatest gifts come in the form of unexpected friendships. When you open your heart to kindness, miracles happen. And for Emma and her K9 companions, a new chapter had just begun. If you believe every act of kindness can change a life, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for more incredible stories like this.